I love how the gospel authors, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, they do different points of it that they wanted to emphasize. Hey, I remember this, or I heard about this, or I saw that, or whatever. And as sometimes they're just outlines, but you put it all together, which I might be able to do. Well, I might be doing it after Matthew, after this whole thing. I can show you the whole case together. Or probably, now you got to wait. I'll probably wait till after John. John has the most on these trials here of Jesus Christ. And we have Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. And then after I do John, then I might do a big video. Oh, no, not a big one. It's too long already, right? A video of what I think the order is and all of it. And Matthew doesn't even mention the whipping, the scourging, the flogging, the torment, the crown of thorns. He didn't mention any of that. But he's just kind of pulling out certain parts of it, particularly the kingship. And all right, let me get on this. This is good. I think, well, pretty sure that we are here. See, Herod is not mentioned at all. The fifth trial of the six different trials. The fifth one, Matthew didn't mention at all. He went to Pontius Pilate. We're in the sixth trial. We'll get to that when we get into the other Gospels. And so, if you remember, the last one was Pilate's wife. Now, I kind of mentioned the idea maybe she knew what was going on in the trial. I doubt it, really, if I think about it more, as I've thought about it more. However, I think she may have known about, well, I think she knew about Jesus. And I think that she already knew there was some sort of plot, a plan, a scheme going on, because Pilate did send, it seems, according to John's writings, soldiers, Roman soldiers there. So he probably talked to her about that, and but who knows. All right, let's go in. Now it goes into, while Pilate was sitting on the judge's seat, his wife, we already did that. Then, in the meantime, by the way, at that time, he was sitting on there, I believe, and kind of waiting for them to discuss the proposition. Remember verse 17, it said that, hey, do you want Barabbas or Barabbas or Jesus? Which do you want? And there was a time there, I think there was space of time for them to discuss it. And that's when this verse comes in and explains what was happening while this message from the wife came to Pontius Pilate, or Pilatus. But the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd. Chief priests and the others, the elders, they persuaded. So they were in the mix and they were all scattered throughout, and it probably was gathering more and more. It's probably, who knows, maybe around 9 o'clock in the morning at this time or something. Or even before that. Could have been like 8, 8:30, 7:30, 8, it was still going on. People were starting to gather more and more, I think. And they, most likely, and my friend, there's got to be some friends of Jesus there. So maybe disciples from Jerusalem. Maybe not a whole lot of Galileans. Sometimes, a lot of times, stereotypically talking about, not everybody, but the Jerusalem and Judeans look down on the upper landward, upper region, which is where Jesus and the disciples of the apostles came and all that. And so there might not, there were a lot of Galileans, but they were probably way over on the other side. Like if you remember, this is probably, almost for sure, where all this was going on, this trial, where the Galileans were probably over near the temple and all, because they came to Jerusalem to be, especially in this temple area and worshiping God. This is a Passover time. It was the very day of the Passover, the festival of the days of the unleavened bread was starting, and it was a lot of worship going on. They wanted to be in the temple area. So a lot of the Galileans were there, not over here at Caiaphas thing. And maybe rumors started coming through and news spread, that Jesus was being on trial. Maybe some of them, definitely knowing that Jesus was there, could have come in, but maybe the chief priests may have kind of, kept them out more. They could kind of tell, who they were and all. Maybe the friends were either, like, the friends of Jesus were pushed aside and separated and kind of ostracized by the leaders of the Jewish people. And there was a lot of respect for these Jewish leaders, at least I would think, because of their positions, their offices. And either they were silenced or they were separated. And they didn't get to be in that crowd very much. But was pretty, strong opposition to Jesus and this crowd. So I just pretty much know that not every disciple of Jesus was there, or they got really intimidated because they didn't want the wrath, the anger of the other people who were being persuaded. The mob can be easily persuaded. People are fickle, fickle, which kind of means they're just wishy-washy, no backbone. Look at Pontius Pilate. It says, but the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and to have Jesus executed. So they had already persuaded them to, no, we don't want Barabbas to be executed. We want him released to free a murderer, a thief. A guy, by the way, who not only was trying to stand up as a patriot, and patriots are good, I'm not saying they aren't, but this patriot was standing up as a nationalist going against Rome, being oppressing, which is, I can understand that, but oppressing them. But he also, in the meantime, stole, even murdered. Not good. All right, then Pilate asked him, Pilatus said, which of the two do you want me to release to you? Asked the governor. And that, in other words, he came back and asked the question again. He did it, I think, was that verse 17? Yeah. Which one? Now he asked again, so he gave him some time here. And he probably got off his seat, and came up again, closer to them and asked his question to the crowds, yelled it out. You know what they said? Well, Barabbas! Barabbas! They answered. Now, I think that at this point, he was shocked. He thought he had a way out. See, Pilate, though he's guilty here in all of being a key figure, he seriously, I think, tried over and over. It's pretty obvious to get him, to release him, because he didn't want to be a part of this. And here's some of the lists of the things that he did to show that he literally tried. Pilate, though guilty, tried. And he literally said this, judge him according to your law. That's what he first said in the beginning. When they first brought him, he didn't know this was going to go this long or this far. He said, what's your accusation against him? Why are you bringing him to me? And they said, because he's, against our laws. And well, they said three things. I already mentioned those. Judge not against our law, but he's causing trouble. By the way, another thing they said in one of the Gospels is that he's causing trouble like a rebellion across Israel, especially in Galilee. He said, judge him according to your law. And then he says, you do it. In other words, you do it. By the way, he literally says this twice. In John, I think later, he says, you crucify him. He was getting, are you kidding? Why should I crucify him? He said it twice, but that's the first thing he said in the beginning. Then he, later, Barabbas, he realized it was a release of a Passover person. By the way, I think really Herod should be up here. I have Herod down here, but that was because that's when they mentioned Galilee. But it could have been Barabbas in the first part and then Herod next. But anyway, later. But there's a Passover release. Remember, there was a tradition that Rome would give a prisoner up so that they wouldn't kill him because they wanted to keep people happy with them and all that. So the Passover release, see, that's another excuse for him to get out of this, because he believed that Jesus really was an innocent man. Now, I mean, this is pretty significant if you think of it. It's pretty important here. That Pilate, I mean, it's a balance, a walk like on a line here, because he's killed others, although it didn't make them happy, but he's kind of ruthless and brutal at times, and he didn't really care that much, I don't think, but I think this guy was really changing him, like his view. He was like, wow, he's so surprised and amazed at Jesus. And then he also compromised with whipping. That's not in this passage at all that he whooped him. He scourged him, had the soldiers whip him with a whip. We'll get into that, of course, in the future. But, or actually, oh, my bad. It actually says they did it right here. But I think he actually did it twice, in my opinion. That's what we'll get later down the line, maybe in John's gospel when we finally get to that. But but the point is, he compromised. He said, okay, let me just whip him. It actually says it's in the Gospels. All right, let me just whip him, And he thought by whipping him and he brought him out again that they would go, oh my goodness, look at that, off. Okay, we'll have mercy. No, they didn't. They wanted his life, his soul. They wanted him killed. They wanted Jesus killed. Compromised with it, whipping. Then he thought, aha, when they mentioned Galilee, the idea that he's starting a revolt, he's speaking against, he's causing trouble, he's a troublemaker in Galilee. He said, wait a minute, Galilee, that's not my jurisdiction. Remember, he was Samaria, he was Judea, and Idumea, in that order right there. And Galilee was up here, and Herod happened to be in town because of the Passover, Herod Antipas. So he tried to get off the hook by letting Herod take care of this thing. It's not under his rule and jurisdiction. Although he is the one in this larger area to be able to put people to death in a court case. He also said, he definitely flat out said, at least I think 2 times, maybe 3, I find no fault in him. So he was like trying to get him free. The fact is he could have. Let's just say it. He could have released him and just, okay, you deal with it. I'm not going to kill this guy. He's free. But he didn't. He didn't go again with his conscience. He went according to politics and trying to please these guys. And later you'll see, I'll just go ahead and say it now, so I'll repeat it again for memory's sake, for us to remember this. He really did it because he feared Tiberius, who was over him. Because when they talked about, no friend of Caesar, that anybody who says this is a king is no friend of Caesar, the upper guy, and he feared that he would be killed because Tiberius would say, what? You let this guy call himself king when I'm king? Power politics. Okay, so he found no fault in him, though. And then the other thing is, you could kind of see they kept trying to release him because he realized an innocent man, because he kept arguing with him. He did it over and over. And this is only the record of it. There might have been things that weren't even mentioned here. I believe there were a lot of talk, a lot of back and forth, and all that. It's like the highlights of the story. There was a whole lot of passing blame, and it reminded me of Adam and Eve. And I'll explain that in a second. But he passed blame to the people of Israel here because he took a water basin and he washed his hands. But Adam blamed Eve. Eve blamed the serpent. God blamed them all. And the Sanhedrin blamed Judas. What is that to you? Whatever you want to do to Judas. And people are blaming all sorts of people. Do you blame someone for your faults? You like to blame people? Get out of blaming. God's not into blaming. It's a shame to blame. So that's kind of what it was. And this is what happened here. The crowds were just pushing him. And what it actually says, it says, what shall I do? Okay, they said Barabbas, and he said, what shall I do then with Jesus, who is called Messiah? He's the Christ. What shall I do with him? See, he kind of blew it. He blundered this whole thing because it was a setup that he didn't realize he was falling to a pit with himself, because he said Barabbas, and he thought Barabbas would be the one executed because he deserved it, and killed. But it was just one thing after another. Then he said, well, what do I do with him? He shouldn't have said that. Why is he asking them? He's the judge. But I think what he was doing in his weakness here is that he did not want to make them mad, even though he knew this guy was innocent. But he was, what do you think I should do? He wanted to just whoop him and let him go on, and he goes about his day. Not happening. That's when they literally started saying, crucify him. It says they all cried, crucify him. Now the chief priests and the elders, the wicked Sanhedrin, who were out there persuading the people, poisoned their minds, and they said to have them say crucify him. It was all plotted. It was planned. And see, the crowd just followed with this thing. Are you a crowd follower? Do you just follow people? Why would you want to follow the crowd? Please don't be a follower. Be a leader. Stand up for what's right, even if you're alone, even if you're by yourself. Jesus was alone there, and he was phenomenal on what his answers are and how he stood quietly. He wasn't trying to escape. He could have tried and he could have made it. I'm pretty sure he could have persuaded Pontius Pilate on everything, but he knew he was doing the will of God because God wanted him to die for our sins. Amazing Lord. But don't follow the crowd. What's your decisions in your life? I make up my mind. I'm going to follow what's right. I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be righteous. Just like the conviction that Pontius Pilate's wife had, maybe actually realizing that she's going to put her husband at risk for death under Tiberius, and yet she still said, don't have anything to do with him. Pretty cool lady there. But anyway, it says, what shall I do then with Jesus who is called the Christ? And they said, crucify him. He went, why? It's like, what do you mean? Kill this guy for what he could tell. He's no criminal. This guy's, he's a nice guy. He's cool. Why? What crime has he committed? In other words, what crime has he committed? Yet there's no real crime. Now, what Matthew does, he didn't go into all the Caesar thing. That's what especially, the others do, but especially John. But he kind of touched on it. He was just saying, one of the things they said during that trial was, crucify him. They got louder. They didn't have a really good answer. And that's what happens. You're in an argument, and then you get louder and louder and louder, because a lot of times you don't have really good answers, and you just repeat it. I'm going to say it louder. It's like you kind of repeat and repeat and repeat, and they got louder. Think about the power, the pressure. That's what caused him to think, oh my goodness, they're yelling at me, and they should be respecting his office and all that, but it's getting loud. And he said, they're going to maybe start throwing things, and someone gets hurt, and a riot, and boom. That's what changed his mind, or led him to give in to them, and shouldn't have gotten near that far. But that's what happened. It's kind of like, though, if you're at a game or something, a basketball game or a football game or something. I heard it this way. It's kind of cool. And then you hear, defense, defense, defense. That crucify him, crucify him. Like a sports thing, like they're yelling out someone. Or you know how you want somebody to come up on stage and you go, whatever his name is, Johnny, 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 yelling the name. The crowd was just flowing, and someone started yelling at another person. It's kind of the flow of the crowd. Oh my goodness, don't go with the flow of the crowd. Say, no, be strong. Be strong to your integrity, your honesty, your heart, your conscience. Do the right thing and speak up. And maybe a few tried to, but they were silenced under the power of the crowd. A lot of people, there's a big multitude. So when Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, he really realized whatever he did, and this is all the Gospels, nothing was happening. They had their argument later about Caesar and all that. He said, and instead, like a tumult or an uproar, it's a real problem with an uprising, like a revolt, a riot. And then that riot news would go all the way up to Rome. And then Tiberius would hear it, and he's already had some problems in the past with there. He wouldn't like it. So he said, he feared man. The fear of man is a snare. It's a trap, the proverb says. And so it trapped him. He shouldn't have been afraid of people. You should be fearing God. And it says, but that instead an uproar was starting, he took water. And so what he did is took water and washed his hands in front of the crowd, and he said, I am innocent of this man's blood. I'm free for this guy's crucifixion. He isn't free. He's not innocent. But he's trying to put all the blame. See, there's a blame thing. He's to blame. He should have stood up and did what was right. But he also put the blame on them. And then what they said. First he said, see to it, like here it is right here. See you to it, which means it's your responsibility. See, he says, see you to it, you take the responsibility. In other words, that's what that means, see you to it. In other words, I put this on you, it's your responsibility. Well, it's his, really, but it's also theirs because they were going along with it. And for thousands of years, 2,000 years, an Apostles' Creed, in other words, a belief, has been spoken. If some of you know the Apostles' Creed, it says, suffered under Pontius Pilate. Nope, you're not free from guilt, buddy. Sorry. now he could have done this and gotten forgiven, by the way, which is just remarkable. Jesus is actually going to the cross for him and his sins too. All right, but let me go into this this thing right here. What did I want to show you here? Oh man, I forgot. Oh, this, yeah, right here. Okay, so what he did is he took a basin. Oh, I've got dice here. I wanted to mention this to you right here. He took a gamble on that question in the beginning. Which should I release unto you? That's a mistake. Then he threw the dice, hoping that they would say, yeah, it should be Barabbas, that is killed. Or, and then he took another gamble of, well, what should you do to him? Can't we just whoop him? No, he was throwing dice, so to speak. He was taking gamble and risk, and he kind of flubbed up on that part. It was a big mistake. And then what happened is he took some basin here. He called someone to go get it, and they gave him water here. I think you know what I'm going to do. Yep, they poured water in here like this. And, yeah, they poured water here. And he washed his hands. Now, this is among the Greeks and Romans, but not much in the Romans. There's not many records of people doing this, although I have read that it has been that. But it is possibly, it's definitely a Jewish tradition, so maybe he knew that and he used it. I don't know. Deuteronomy chapter 21, verses 6 through 9, literally talks about this idea of the elders, the priests, of taking the water like someone is innocent. Someone got killed and they don't know who it is, so this symbolic way of saying washing your hands. It's also mentioned in Psalms, where I wash my hands, here, and then also Acts 20 is another one. Acts 20, Paul said, I'm free from the blood of all men and all that, which there is kind of a definitely thing. And so, like, it's definite tradition. It's a symbol of saying, I'm pure, I'm clean. It's not my blood on the person's hands. It's not my blood on his hands, which it is, but he's trying to say that. Now, he literally took his hands in front of them. Very unusual. I mean, this is probably the only time he ever did this. Maybe, I don't know, in history, but we don't know his court cases, but I think as I've studied and researched, it's not really common to do that, that's for sure. And so he washed his hands in front of them, and then they said this, and I'm going to finish with this. I was wondering if I was going to do this long, but I'm trying to keep it short. But anyway, then what they said is this. They said, let his blood be on us and on our children, our descendants, our kids. And his blood was on their head, on these precious people, and also on their kids. 40 years later, and I think this is maybe a combination of really what happened, that God did judge them, and he had Jerusalem wiped out. 1 million people is what's predicted that was actually killed in the war. From 66 to 70 AD 70, the judgment, I think that's what Jesus predicted in Matthew 24 and all. Excuse me, I think it was a judgment of God, maybe. Yeah, I believe it probably was, in that on their kids. Their kids went through that horrible time. It's one of the worst times ever in the history of mankind. I'm not going to go into it. Disease, I'll say this, disease, killings. I could go worse. I'm not going to say the worst things that happened. It was really horrible. It was just a lot of blood shed and everything. And so the blood, in my opinion, it was God's judgment on the precious people back then. It's not all of them. It's not all the Jewish people. Are kidding. As a matter of fact, some people use this scripture. Over the centuries, it's been used by so-called Christians to point to the Jews and antagonize it, hate them and be against them and persecute the Jews. Wrong. After all, this Matthew, when he's writing it, he's Jewish, and his community of believers that he's writing to is Jewish. The first Christians were all Jews. Almost all the people were Jewish, and that happened for a long time. The apostles were Jewish, so we're not going to point to the Jewish people and blame them. It's those particular people in that particular time, and that's a leadership, and not even all the leadership. the gospel writers were clear that it wasn't. It even says some of them weren't, and they kept it silent, a lot of them. But there's Nicodemus, and I've already talked about him. Nicodemus and Joseph. Joseph gave his grave to this man. He wouldn't have done that if he hated him. So we don't blame the Jewish people. You know who we really should blame? Me. Me. Blame me. It's my sin that ultimately put Jesus on the cross. I was the one. I didn't be in the crowd and do this, but I'm the one that caused him to die for us. You know what I mean? It's indirectly, but it's me. I did it. It's my sins that caused him to come in the first place to die for us. Yeah, and you might be mad at this or upset, and it is upsetting to see with this whole deal. You cannot blame the Jewish people. You cannot blame just Pontius Pilate or the Sanhedrin or Caiaphas, or any of those people. We blame, the blame is us, all of us, including you. Yeah, you. Your sins, your things that you've said, that you've done wrong, are what put Jesus on the cross. Now, you said, well, I didn't ask him to be put on the cross. Fine. Then you're going to be under the judgment of God, and then you'll be destroyed. Jesus Christ went through this for you and me because of his great love for us, and that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. He demonstrated his love for us. I don't blame them at all. I blame me for my sins. I take the ownership of it. It's me that put Jesus Christ on the cross, what I've done. And thank God for his great love and mercies. And it makes me want to have mercy on everybody around me because of that, because I know my sin and I know what I deserve. I don't deserve mercy. I deserve judgment. I literally deserve to go to hell, honestly. So Jesus Christ did that for us. So we don't want to take that verse in Matthew. Matthew's been criticized for centuries about this, but he himself, I don't think, had this intentional thing to blame the Jews. He himself was Jewish. And he himself, all those people were Jews. You say Matthew's not a Jewish name. His name was Levi. That's Jewish. Levi is probably the pronunciation. And but his other name using the Greek form is Matthew. And all the apostles, all of them were Jewish. Jesus was a Jew. All of it. So no, we don't want to blame those people. I blame me. There's that blame thing again, that blame game. Don't play the game, blame, of blame. All right, thank you for listening. God bless you. Be sure and thank God for all that he went through for us, that he sent Jesus for us, and I hope you're getting a lot out of this. God bless you. Bye.